Hi, welcome to our channel Programming of Mind, where we accelerate your knowledge with concise, from high-value book summaries. Let's begin the role of emotions in Mars and Venus relationships. Why are emotions such a big deal between men and women? Emotions can be a powerful force in any relationship. They guide our decisions, shape our perceptions, and ultimately influence how we connect with others. However, for many couples, emotions often seem to create more tension than harmony. The challenge lies in the fact that men and women often experience, express, and process emotions in very different ways. Imagine a situation where David and Emma are having an argument. Emma is upset because she feels David hasn't been as present lately, while David feels frustrated because he's been working long hours and hasn't had the emotional energy to engage as deeply as Emma wants. In this moment, Emma's emotions are running high. She's feeling neglected and emotional, while David is feeling overwhelmed and disconnected from his feelings. What happens next is a pattern that happens in many relationships. Emma may express her feelings in an intense, emotional way, hoping that David will pick up on her distress and respond with care. However, David may retreat or become defensive because, as a man, he tends to compartmentalize his emotions and find it difficult to deal with them when they are brought to the surface. This emotional disconnect can create a cycle of frustration, where Emma feels unheard and David feels attacked. The emotional needs of men and women are often mismatched because their emotional experiences differ significantly. For women, emotions are an essential part of their world. They feel deeply and want to express those feelings in a way that brings them closer to their partner. For men, emotions are often something to be managed and understood rather than expressed openly. This leads to a gap in how emotions are handled, and without awareness, it can cause serious friction in relationships. Emotional expression. A Venus perspective for women, emotions are not just reactions. They are integral to how they connect with others. When a woman shares her feelings, it's often a way to create intimacy and build connection. Women often feel the need to be understood, validated, and cared for when they express their emotions. For example, after a stressful day, a woman might talk about how she's feeling overwhelmed, exhausted, or anxious. In these moments, the goal is not to receive advice or solutions, but simply to feel heard and supported. Let's take the example of Lucy and Brian. Lucy has been juggling work, kids, and household chores, and she feels like she's constantly running on empty. When she talks to Brian about it, she's hoping he will listen, validate her experience, and offer emotional support. However, Brian, who tends to avoid emotional conversations, listens for a minute before suggesting that Lucy take a break or outsource some tasks. To Lucy, this feels dismissive. She doesn't want a solution. She wants to be understood. This is an example of how men and women can misinterpret each other's emotional needs. Brian, in his male perspective, thinks he's being helpful by offering a solution, but Lucy is looking for empathy and validation. Over time, if these emotional disconnects are not addressed, both partners may feel lonely in the relationship, even when they are physically close. Emotional retraction. A Mars perspective for men, emotions are often compartmentalized. They tend to process their feelings internally and may not feel the same urgency to share their emotions in the same way women do. A man may feel frustrated, but instead of expressing that frustration openly, he might retreat into his own space to figure things out on his own. This withdrawal can be confusing and hurtful for women, who may interpret it as disinterest or emotional coldness. Let's consider Jack and Carla. One evening, Jack is feeling stressed about a presentation at work. Instead of talking to Carla about it, he isolates himself in his home office, working through his concerns alone. Carla, noticing the distance, assumes that Jack is angry with her or that he's shutting her out. She starts to feel insecure, wondering if there's something wrong with their relationship. However, what Carla doesn't know is that Jack's emotional response is typical of many men. When facing emotional stress, men often retreat into solitude, trying to find solutions internally before discussing their feelings. For men like Jack, this is a coping mechanism. a way to regain control of their emotions. While Jack doesn't mean to ignore Carla, his actions can inadvertently create emotional distance. Emotional needs and the desire for connection, understanding the different ways men and women respond emotionally, can significantly improve how they connect with one another. Women, in general, have an emotional need for connection. They want to share their feelings, to feel heard, and to experience empathy. When their emotional needs are not met, they may feel neglected, misunderstood, or unloved. Men, on the other hand, may express emotional needs through actions rather than words. They may feel loved and appreciated when their partner shows affection, respects their independence, or supports them in their endeavors. Consider the example of Jessica and Michael. Jessica enjoys deep emotional conversations and often initiates them, wanting to share her day and discuss her feelings. Michael, who feels more comfortable with physical affection than with words, expresses his love for Jessica by doing things like fixing things around the house, running errands, or cooking meals. Jessica sometimes feels like Michael doesn't understand her emotional needs because he doesn't always engage in the same type of emotional conversation she craves. However, Michael's actions show that he is deeply committed and emotionally available, just in a different way. The power of validation and emotional expression, one of the most powerful things a partner can do in any relationship, is to validate their partner's emotions. Validation doesn't mean agreeing with everything your partner says, but rather acknowledging that their feelings are real and significant. It means saying, "I see you, I hear you, and I understand that this matters to you." This kind of emotional support is critical for both men and women. Take the case of Sarah and Thomas. Sarah feels deeply hurt after an argument with Thomas. Instead of jumping into a debate about who was right or wrong, Thomas simply acknowledges her feelings. He says, "I can see that you're really hurt, and I'm sorry for how I acted." This small act of validation immediately helps Sarah feel understood and calms her down, allowing them to move forward in their conversation. For men, validation is equally important, even if they're less expressive about it. When a man is under pressure at work, his partner can validate his experience by acknowledging his stress rather than trying to minimize it or offer solutions. For instance, saying, "I can see that you're really stressed, and that must be difficult," shows empathy and helps the man feel supported without being pressured to fix anything. Creating a safe space for emotional expression, one of the keys to a successful relationship, is creating a space where both partners feel safe to express their emotions without fear of judgment or criticism. This means fostering an environment where both partners can speak openly about their feelings, knowing that their emotions will be respected. It's not about constantly sharing deep emotional moments, but rather building an atmosphere where both partners feel comfortable being themselves. For couples like Rachel and Sam, creating this kind of emotional safety has been a game changer. Sam, a man who tends to bottle up his feelings, now feels more comfortable sharing what's on his mind because he knows Rachel won't try to fix everything or judge him for feeling vulnerable. Similarly, Rachel feels that she can open up without fear of being dismissed. Emotional intelligence. The secret to navigating Mars and Venus ultimately, emotional intelligence is what allows men and women to bridge the gap between their different emotional worlds. By being aware of their own emotions, understanding their partner's emotional needs, and responding with empathy, couples can create a relationship that is not just emotionally supportive, but emotionally fulfilling. Emotional intelligence helps partners understand that men and women process emotions differently and that these differences don't have to be a source of conflict. Instead, they can become an opportunity for growth, learning, and deeper connection. When both partners feel emotionally secure, the relationship becomes a safe space for personal vulnerability and shared joy. Thank you for listening, and please like the video and subscribe for more great upcoming content that will put you in top 1% people in the world.